Oh, hey, I'm Joe Mack. Welcome back to the channel. We did it. We finished the First Law Trilogy. So today, we're talking about The Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. This was bittersweet. I had a great time listening to Stephen Pacey narrate all three of these books, and I'm very much looking forward to getting through more of Joe Abercrombie's work and listening to Stephen Pacey narrate those. However, there's a lot of books to get to, so I am going to take a little bit of a break from Mr. Abercrombie and the things that he's wrote from the First Law universe, and I'm going to miss Stephen, but I need to widen my horizons in the audiobook area. And so next up for audiobooks, I'm doing a reread or a first listen of Sun Eater by Christopher Rocchio, narrated by Samuel Rukin. But enough of what I'm going to do next. Let's dive in to The Last Argument of Kings. Right off the bat, it was not as good as Before They Are Hanged. I think that it was better than the Blade itself. It did some justice to the characters that are in the story. But I am judging this whole trilogy the same way that I would judge the original Star Wars trilogy. We have Before They Are Hanged is the best. We have Last Argument of Kings second. And finally, The Blade itself. Doesn't mean that The Blade itself is bad when I say that. Just of the three, it's the weakest. The Last Argument of Kings did a lot of things right. I don't think it really did anything wrong. It just didn't have as much of an impact on me the same way that Before They Are Hanged did. And with that being said, what's my rating? We're doing things out of 10 now. So I would make Before They Are Hanged, which I gave a 5 out of 5. That's a 10 out of 10. You know, quick math. I'm going 8 out of 10 for Last Argument of Kings. So why an 8 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10 when I said there really wasn't anything wrong with this book? And I think that that comes down to more of an inherent problem with the story than of the book itself. What I mean is that I find that certain plot lines didn't deliver, that they serve themselves or as a plot device for something else going on versus serving the greater overall narrative. I also think that some of the events and goings on with the characters were predictable, and I was hoping for more than what it gave me. I think that certain ways that Joe Abercrombie tied up some of the characters in the end was also lackluster. And it's for those reasons, really, that I dropped the score. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the writing or the pacing. I just think that there were some things that really shouldn't have been included at all. And because this is the third book, when we tie up those plot lines or those character arcs, or when certain, I can't get into it too much because it's spoilery, but when certain things happen, they were predictable, self-indulgent, or unnecessary. Let's take a deeper dive into some of the characters and find out where they ended up on my running series of character rankings for the First Law. Glokta, still number one. I think that what happens for his character arc and through his plot lines is fantastic. I think that the way that his character arc ends is awesome. I think that he stays very true to who he is. There's never any wavering. The callbacks to previous books that take place in this one are fantastic. Glokta, by far, is the best character. And I think that I would think the same, even if Stephen Pacey wasn't doing an absolutely incredible job voicing him. Logan's still top 3, I think. I don't know if he's still second place. It's really the Glokta show, and then everyone else is kind of in a mishmash of second, third, and so forth. It's going to be a little tougher for me to put an actual number on them, but there were some things. Really, it's the Bloody Nine. I think the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde aspect of his character is interesting, and I think it's used very well. But I'm not a big fan of the Bloody Nine. I don't like the way that Logan made so much personal progression in a way that he wanted on his journey with Jazal, Baez, and Pharaoh. And the Bloody Nine kind of flushes some of that down the toilet, and that didn't sit right with me. I didn't necessarily enjoy that part of it, which is why he's kind of fallen in favor. If they were two separate characters entirely, Logan's still second, and the Bloody Nine's like down the line. But because they are the same character, I have to respect that, and he's not second place anymore. He's definitely lower. Pharaoh, on the other hand, I know I just said everyone's in a mishmash, but Pharaoh's probably my second favorite character at the end of this book. Glokta, then Pharaoh, Jazal, then Logan. I'll finish my Pharaoh thoughts before I talk about Jazal, though. Pharaoh, now that I think if I were to do a reread, I would really appreciate a lot more of Pharaoh earlier. I love her brashness. The way that she also stays very true to herself throughout the entire story. And her character growth, I really enjoyed watching. And the same goes for Jazal. I think that Jazal kind of went on the exact opposite of an arc. Not exactly, but that he had a lot of character growth just like Logan did. Jazal wasn't looking for it. But when it smacked him in the face in book 2, and the things that he goes through in this book, and it shows who he really is, that those stories that Baez told him really hit home. I really liked his character by the end of this book. I mean, Baez is just a bastard. So he's like last. He went from, I think he was second after the first book. Not a big fan of Baez. I love the archetype that he ends up being. Like the character archetype that Baez is used for, I think is super interesting, and I don't think I'm meant to like him. So kudos, Mr. Abercrombie. If that was the way that it was supposed to go, that's how it went for me. So Glokta, Pharaoh, Jazal, Logan, Baez. I think that the pacing throughout the entire book was done very well. I didn't get bored. I didn't find there to be slow pieces whatsoever. The different character point of views that we get within chapters, I think, was done very well, just like it was done in book 2. I think that you can tell that Joe Abercrombie really learned a lot after The Blade itself, going into Before They Are Hanged and Last Argument of Kings. I had no problem with the structure or the pacing. I think that was top notch. Most of my problems with this book just come from plot points. He did a good job. Everything got tied up. I don't have any questions specifically about any plot lines that were set up. And most of the plots that develop from book 1 and book 2 are wrapped up by the end of book 3, with one glaring omission, which I'll get to in the later half in the spoiler section. But the plot was the disappointing aspect. I think most of the character arcs were a little disappointing, just as far as like their final scenes go. I think that a lot of the character arcs were done well, but it was the sticking of the landing that fell short for me. That's about all I can say without getting into spoilers. It's very difficult for me to cover a lot of this stuff without talking about specifics. So this is our spoiler warning from this point forward. All right, let's start the easy way. Let's just talk about these character arcs that I had a little bit of a problem with and how they ended. The most glaringly terrible way to end a character was Pharaoh. We literally just sent her off into the distance. Like, we get a little bit of an allusion to she's a lot stronger and more resilient now that she's held the seed, and Baez used it to channel his art. But it's just like a ride off into the sunset for Pharaoh to go get her vengeance, which is great. I'm happy that she's going to get to do that because I love her, but I would have liked to. I feel like we were set up to see some of that vengeance, or for that vengeance to be on like some sort of very large scale utilizing the seed. So that was disappointing. Logan and the way that his story ends, I liked the callback to chapter 1 of the Blade itself. I think that's cute, but dissatisfying. Dissatisfying, unsatisfied, dissatisfied. I didn't like it. I didn't like a lot of what happened with Logan. To see the dog man lose some of his love for Logan based on his actions throughout fighting in the North. To see Logan not want to be king, but like still accept it instead of just say, no, someone else take it, which is what I expected. And it's okay that it wasn't what I wanted. I'm not saying that I knew best. I obviously don't know best. I'm just a little point to make. And then for him to make it back to the North, the constant red herring of Shivers, and then for Black Dow to have a little coup against Logan, and for him to just run and jump out a window with there being like, I just didn't like it. Jazal, I think, was fine. It's not everything needs to be positive. I'm not saying that everybody needs to have a happy ending, and I'm not saying that people needed to just die either. For ultimate closure. I understand that these characters' lives are going to continue, and we're not going to get stories from until their death if they don't die in battle or whatever it is, but I don't know. And so with Jazal, his is a little more negative. It's a little more gut-wrenching with the dramatic irony that we know why the queen is coming to his bed now thanks to Glokta, and the whole her being more interested in women. His isn't so terrible. I loved watching him step into the role of king and watching him care for the smaller man after the entire first book and up until he gets beat in the face. Watching him really turn over a new leaf and sticking to it. He's got some slip ups where he's king, but he is king. He's not wrong when he makes those grand statements, where he's a little more spoiled about how he should be treated, but because that's his role. But I really like seeing him grow and become a better person. Baez is a bastard, but like I said earlier, but seeing him fill that role of ancient, very powerful man who's running everything in the background as the architect was a very cool little reveal that he is the Bank of Valent in bulk. So that was very nice to see, knowing that he's going to continue to, we don't know how long he lives for. So, and I don't know what the standalones or the second trilogy, how far ahead that goes, but there is a chance that he'll be in those. So we'll see what happens. Which leads me to transitioning from that character arc line to the plots. Is the war in the North was pointless. It pulled the army north. It served some purposes to move some pieces, but it didn't matter that Colin West became Lord Marshal, because then they give him the disease and he's on his deathbed. It didn't matter that we killed King Bethod. It didn't matter who that witch was or where she got her powers from. It didn't matter that the Feared was one of Glistrod's people, because they all just die. I enjoyed the fight scenes. I'm just saying, for the grand narrative of this breaking the first law versus breaking the second law, Baez against Khalul, the Eaters and everything else that's going on, to me seemed like the main portion of the story. Like that was the main plot, and the war in the North was just there. And that brings me to cool. Baez killed the 100 Words. He killed Mamoon, but Khalul's still living large. So like that's not done. We got a battle won, but the war continues. So I know that there's more books, but I know that there's time jumps, and it's a handful of standalones. So I'm hoping that plot thread continues. It will be very disappointing if if that's it, that nobody won, that that Kalul lost a bunch more people, which he's been throwing people against a wall the whole time. He doesn't care about their lives. So that doesn't really seem like a loss to me. Um, I hope that eventually there's an end to that plot line, because I'm dying to know what's going on between those two. My favorite part of this book was a one-line moment, and it might have been because of the way that Stephen Pacey delivered the line. I'm sure that had I been reading it, I would have mentally done a different voice. But it's when Logan is in, what is it, open council? They're saying that it's going to go into recess. And Logan walks up to Jazal to give his support. And he turns to the audience and he tells them to make sure that don't make him come back, with some cussing. And the way that Stephen Pacey delivered that line, it made me laugh. It was well-placed humor. I don't know. I imagine that there was some conversation between Joe Abercrombie and Stephen Pacey on how to deliver that line. So I imagine it was meant to be humorous. And I'm sure if I had read it, it would have been much more like mentally growly and just angry. But that line was a real highlight for me, and that's the part of the book that really sticks out in the end as one of the moments I enjoyed. Overall, I really enjoyed all three of these books. This was my first exposure both to Joe Abercrombie and to audiobooks. I'm very much looking forward to continuing with both, to see how other narrators live up to Stephen Pacey, and to see where Joe Abercrombie takes the rest of this First Law world. And eventually, when I finish all the other books, I'm looking forward to reading The Devils, which I know does not take place in this universe and is the start of something else for him. How did you guys like the First Law Trilogy? Did you love it as much as I feel like everyone else does? Did you find the same problems with the way that character arcs and plot lines finished in Last Argument of Kings? Get in those comments. Love you. Bye.